A Christmas rental in the Catskills. Their family photos brought from home hung on the walls. Place cards lined the holiday table. Mine wasn't there. Before we begin, please subscribe and hit like. It helps us keep telling these stories all the way through. Megan texted me weeks ago just this once. Dad, all of us together before Christmas. I said yes before I remembered how together sounds in this family. Route 28 climbed longer than the map promised. The car smelled of wet fur from the tree lots, a thread of wood smoke from scattered houses, and coffee gone to cardboard in its paper cup. I killed the radio before the gravel turn. The cedar-sided place had a wide porch, 2 gooseneck lamps, the kind of rental with a name like Birch Hollow, and a note in the listing, families only. Megan, my oldest, waited on the porch in a red hat, holding the door so it wouldn't slap the frame. Behind her, shapes moved. Someone laughed. A white ribbon of breath cutting the cold. Side entrance for you, Dad, it's quieter there, she said, already swinging my suitcase out of my hand. Quieter meant the little room by the attic stairs, where the draft felt like a bus stop. A thin gray blanket was folded into a motel triangle. On the nightstand, a candle labeled balsam and cedar. I ran a finger over the metal lid. It left fur and cheap vanilla on my skin. Downstairs, car doors thumped. Outside, the neighbor boys shrieked on sleds, a bright noise that always loosens a man's shoulders. Their laughter blew toward the house, like dishes clinking in a far kitchen. My own laugh doesn't live here. Since Caroline, my ex-wife, took the kids and called it, for the best, I've learned the weight of a silence without my name in it. The kitchen glowed yellow. Steam rose off the turkey and something brown in a cast-iron skillet. Trader Joe's bags crowded the island. A bunch of rosemary poked from one. Melissa, my son David's wife, was slicing a baguette. She nodded without looking up. Thomas, hands, guest bath left. The soap there smelled like the same winter fur as the candle upstairs. By the microwave, a black binder, labeled House Rules, sat open to a laminated inventory. 2 brass candlesticks, the 1st of December anter, 12 dinner plates. A note. Damages photographed at checkout. Rentals have a way of counting what you touch. On the buffet beside 2 fat candles, and the rental agreement, lay a tidy stack of white forms with pale blue borders. A few corners were dog-eared, like someone had been marking pages. I didn't read the headings. Not yet. The dining room looked like the magazines Caroline used to leave on our coffee table when the coffee table was still ours. White cloth, green napkins, heavy plates with a thin gold rim. Place cards stood like tiny doors. Megan, Tyler, her husband, Katie, my younger daughter, Jason, her husband, David, Maine Lissa, California Roline, Greg, her new husband. I walked the perimeter as if checking level. No Thomas. The empty head chair read like a pause in someone else's sentence. Here, Dad. Megan slid a chair. The wood complained like an old dock plank. Her hand touched my shoulder light, practical, the way you tack a garland to a nail. You're probably tired from the drive, Caroline said in a nurse's end of shift voice that covers what doesn't need saying. Greg set a tall decanter down. A ribbon of wine ran down the glass throat. He smiled as if we'd always known each other. Nice pick, David, he said about the bottle. Though the house was a rental, and the wine likely came off a shelf in Kingston. I touched the knife smooth, balanced, a tool my palm remembered. On the nearest candlestick, a bead of wax had set in a rough ridge, as if someone bumped it and wiped it with a napkin. Little things on other people's tables tell more than the photos on their walls. The photos were theirs. Frames brought in a box already hung on waiting nails in the hall, a graduation, a beach day, kids in a pumpkin patch. Where our smile used to live, something current fit better. I followed the line, didn't find myself in it. Wine went round. My glass landed farthest away, half lost in a fold of cloth. I lifted it out of politeness. Nose was right. Cherry, leather, a little smoke. First sip just the rim of the tongue like you're taught. Then a thin, papery splinter of bitterness lodged up behind my teeth, foreign and dry, as if the morning coffee had decided to speak again. I set the glass down and poured water instead. Blood pressure acting up? Drink water? Caroline said evenly. I nodded. Outside, the rhythm of shovels. The men were clearing the walk. In the next room, a cartoon song about a snowman thinned into sage and butter. From the road, a car rolled by slow, headlights painting the wall and moving on. From a distance, it looked like a normal American picture at Christmas time. From a distance, it always does. Let's not make a scene tonight, David said, touching my plate to square it with the edge. The sentence was a sanded slat, smooth, convenient, not cut from his wood. I unfolded the cloth napkin onto my lap. My hands were dry from the soap. Skin caught on cotton like grit on sandpaper. I thought of the enamel kettle back home. It whistles 1 second before I'm ready. In this house, someone else whistles for you. We ate. Melissa talked about a new roll. Greg praised the oven, holds heat like a Swiss one. Katie nodded without looking up. Tyler laughed where laughter was asked for. I counted sounds instead, a fork pinging china, a chair's small groan, a kitchen whisper, we'll discuss it later. I didn't ask what later meant. My fingers found the warm ring my glass printed on the table. It was already drying, like some decisions around me. When I stood to look out the window, Megan passed behind me with a small stack of blank cards and a black felt tip. A minute later, one lay by my plate, Thomas, the stock heavier, fresher than the others, ink still a shade wet. Mine was the only card in felt tip. The rest looked printed. Someone wanted everything to look right, and someone wanted me to notice. After dinner, the house settled into the kind of hum that feels rehearsed. The dishwasher clicked. The oven ticked as it cooled. A bowl game murmured in the next room without asking anyone to care. Candle ends puddled at the bases of the brass sticks. Someone slid the dimmer down until every edge in the room suggested forgiveness. Leftovers moved into plastic. Steam lifted when lids snapped shut. I rinsed the platter and set it beside the Black House Rules binder still open to the laminated inventory. 2 brass candlesticks, the 1st of December anter, 12 dinner plates. A small note at the bottom, neat and firm. Damages photographed at checkout. Rentals have a way of counting what you touch. Greg drifted to the window with me and made weather talk, how the plows were late this year, how the ridge drifts shut. I nodded in the right places. 10 minutes slid by. Maybe 20. The house thinned into late evening air. Top you off? He asked, already tilting the decanter. A red line climbed the glass. I lifted the wine more to move it than to drink it, and set it down again. Water did the rest. Whatever bitterness I'd tasted before, I blamed on the day's coffee and the drive. On the buffet, those white forms with pale blue borders had migrated closer to the candles, tidy and expectant, held by a folded sticky note. I didn't read the heading. Not now. In a little wicker basket by the sink lay a tube of winter fur hand cream, the same one every woman in the house had used all evening. Outside, a car rolled past slow, headlights brushing the wall and moving on. Somewhere down the road, a carol started and fell apart on the second verse, then turned into laughter. In the bunk room, Jason, Katie's husband, and Tyler, Megan's, argued cheerfully about which sled ran faster. Their boots thumped once and were done. Tired lived where my eyes met the light. You should rest, Caroline said, not looking up from the plates. Stairs are steep. Take the rail. The kind of sentence you give a stranger at a church potluck. I nodded. A man can make a whole evening out of nodding. The hall to my little room held every photo they'd hung, arms thrown around shoulders, beach grins, pumpkin patches, the practiced ease of people certain of their place. The runner didn't sit square. Its edge nipped my shoe and made a soft sound like paper tearing. I pinched it back into line and felt the banister's polish under my palm, warm and slick, with years that weren't mine. Upstairs smelled faintly of that fur cream, sweet, cool, and clean. I sat on the bed, unlaced my boots, told myself I'd lie back for 10 minutes and come down for pie. The room gave its motel comforts. A lamp too bright, a blanket too thin, a nightstand that asked nothing. My mouth stayed dry in a chalky way water couldn't fix. I had taken a sip of wine and left it there. Mostly water. Mostly road. In the guest bath, the tap ran metallic and cold. I cupped some, drank, and stood to listen. Heat shifted in the vents. A branch tapped the siding. Downstairs, someone laughed and ended it early. I told my knees to carry me to bed. They didn't listen. Halfway down the hall, the scent of fur sharpened as if a drawer of sachets had been opened. The runner caught my shoe again. I steadied with my right hand on the rail. In the dim mouth of the stairwell, a shape paused. A long, dark cardigan hung straight. No waist. The kind catalogs call cozy. Both Caroline and Melissa had worn long, dark cardigans earlier. In this light, one silhouette could be either. A hand moved, then stilled. Metal made a delicate tick against wood. Nothing more, just the idea of a person where the light failed. "I'm fine," I meant to say, to ease whatever worry stood there. What came out was smaller. The shape didn't come closer. It shifted a half step, the way you dodge a door you weren't expecting to open. The fur scent pressed against the cool of the hallway, the same fragrance that sat in the basket by the sink, the one they all had used. My mouth went dry in a new way, papery, as if I'd chewed a page. The rail under my palm felt far away and slick. I set my foot to the top stair and felt the runner's edge ride up against my sole. I held the rail harder. The shape flinched, the way a child does when you catch them at the cookie jar. A small metallic scrape, the sound of cup to saucer, or candlestick to wood, and then the air moved fast. Something hard met the edge of my brow, not a smash, a flat, purposeful knock, light scattered. A ring, cold and sudden, brushed my cheek as if a hand had meant to steady me, and didn't. The house tilted right, then nowhere at all, then only black. White light snapped the black in half. Antiseptic and lemon polish, the kind hospitals use to promise order. A monitor somewhere counted in soft beeps that didn't belong to me. My tongue felt like paper. A nurse with winter-dry hands tucked a blanket tighter than I needed. "Name and birth date?" she asked. "Thomas Whitaker, June 12th. My voice sounded borrowed. She checked the bracelet. "Admit 2234. "How's your pain, Mr. Whitaker, 0 to 10? 2, I said, because it felt like a test I could pass. A doctor with a holiday tie looked me over. "Penlight a small Sunday. CT is clean. Small laceration right brow. 3 stitches. Concussion." Somebody said stairs? "Stairs," I said. The word had edges. "Any loss of consciousness?" "Some." The room tilted just enough to prove I remembered. He nodded. "No alcohol tonight?" I had a sip of wine, mostly water. He marked something. "Usual instructions: rest, no driving tonight, wake-ups. If you vomit or get worse headache, come back. Avoid alcohol," he added. A habit more than an accusation. Through the curtain gap I could see the waiting area. A television playing a baking show with 2 perfect snowflake cookies, a toddler making a tired sawtooth cry, a plastic wreath hung where a clock should be. My family clustered like a weather system. Caroline sat with her coat still on, arms folded as if holding a position. Greg stood and talked low into his phone. Megan held a styrofoam cup with both hands, watching the door, not the television. David scrolled. Katie lined up 3 hospital brochures like coasters and then moved them a 1/4 inch, making them straight. They let them in one by one. The room filled with wool and cold hallway air. Caroline's smile was built of good manners. "They were short-staffed," she said to the room. More than to me. "You scared everyone." "I'm fine," I said. It sounded smaller out loud. David took the cleanest part, the one offered. "You were asleep by 10, Dad." "Guess the drive did you in." 10, I repeated. Greg patted the rail like a railing could be encouraged. "I walked you to the stairs right before 10. You said you'd grab water and turn in." Megan, quiet, eyes on my stitches. "You were telling Tyler that shop story at 10:15. The sander that ate your sleeve? Maybe that was earlier." Her smile ended too quick. The doctor came back with papers and a small white bottle. "Acetaminophen if you need it. These are your discharge instructions." He read the parts insurance requires, circled a number with a blue pen, handed David the packet when I didn't reach for it fast enough. The nurse added a pair of skid socks and a folded sheet. "Head injury, what to watch for." Her hands smelled faintly of coffee and sanitizer. The plastic bracelet itched. "A payment slip with copay due at checkout, Slid in with the paper's holiday medicine has its own carols. Outside in the cold, the parking lot lamps made cones in the mist. David's SUV smelled like French fries and winter coats. The seat heater told my back things were going to be fine. The windshield wipers whispered across a film of salt. Nobody said much. Houses slid by, lit at their edges porches with plastic deer, windows with paper stars. In the quiet, I sorted what they'd said and what they hadn't. 10. Right before 10. 10:15. Back at the rental, the porch light made the snow look cleaner than it was. Inside, the house had reset itself, dishwasher done, counters wiped, a candle snubbed to a curl of smoke. The binder by the microwave lay closed now, elastic band neat across it. The inventory wasn't looking at me anymore. Sleep, Carolyn said from the kitchen doorway, already half turned away. Stairs are steep. I'll get his water, David said, and set a glass on the counter. The rim left a ring I wanted to memorize. I told them I'd manage. I did not believe, and did not say anything about believing. The hall runner still didn't sit square. The same edge nipped my shoe and made that soft tearing noise, as if the house were made of paper, and someone kept testing where it would rip. I pinched the corner and felt the rail warm again, a second body's heat held there. The fur hand cream had been busy. Upstairs, my room waited the way rooms do when they've been aired, and made presentable. I sat on the bed and let the quiet fit me. The discharge sheet wanted wake-ups. The CT buzz still ran in my bones. Sleep wouldn't come. The instructions lay on my lap. No alcohol. Rest. Wake every few hours first night. At the bottom, the print showed the time. Discharged 0:41. The bracelet pinched. On the bedside table, someone had set a little tower of folded tissues, as if I were a guest in a bed and breakfast run by a considerate stranger. I went back down for the water I hadn't drunk. The kitchen clock muttered minutes. On the buffet, the white forms with the pale blue borders had shifted again. The sticky note that held the stack had loosened. The top page slid just enough to show a header, Residential Care Intake Initial Assessment. In the corner, a ballpoint note. After holidays call. Keep resting polite enough to pass in any family. I didn't touch it. I just let the words arrange themselves where they could do the most work. On the dining table, wax had run and set along the brass in a new ripple. Next to the candlestick, a white cloth napkin lay folded wrong, the way a person folds when they're in a hurry. Someone had started to clear and got pulled away. The napkin sat where a hurry leaves things. A faint, rusty crescent stained the edge thin as a thumbnail moon. I lifted the corner. The color wasn't the wine's clean ruby. It was browner, as if the fabric had had an argument with something that didn't belong on a holiday table. I held the napkin a second longer than anyone would think necessary. Then I put it down exactly where it had been, as if putting something back into a story that wanted to forget it was ever there. From the bunk room came a sleep-thick murmur and the soft thud of a boot falling off a bed. Outside, a plow dragged its iron along the road and threw a slow wave of snow past the mailbox. I turned off the kitchen light and stood a moment in the doorway, letting the hum of the house make its case. On my way to the stairs, the runner's corner lifted itself the smallest bit, a cat's ear of fabric catching my shoe. I bent and pressed it flat with my thumb. Under the edge, where the binding meets the pile, a pinhead of brown had dried into the warp. I kept my thumb there until the heat left it. Then I climbed, counting the steps the way you do when you mean to wake yourself before you're ready. Morning came in a gray sheet that made every color polite. The coffee maker on the counter gurgled like a pond thawing. Someone had set out mugs matching, red snowflakes except one, plain white, hairline crack at the rim. It was parked by the fridge with a second-best spoon. A man notices where he's meant to stand. Caroline moved through the kitchen with the quiet of someone who's already made 3 decisions. "How's your head?" she asked, eyes on the toaster. "Fine." The truth was a number 3. Maybe, but we had agreed on simple math. David came in with snow on his shoulders and shook it off outside the door. "Took a look at the steps." He reported to no one in particular. "That runner's slick. I'll pull it later." Right before 10 he went up, Greg said, spreading jam like an alibi. "Told me he'd get water. Megan set a plate down and adjusted it half an inch. You were telling Tyler that shop story, what, 10? 15? Or maybe I'm mixing nights. She smiled the way you smile when you hope a story lands soft. Katie brought in a small trash bag from the guest bath. It clinked once against the cabinet. She reached to tie it, and the bottom edge tore. She pinched it closed with 2 fingers and said, "Ugh," to the air. I stepped forward out of habit and she said, "I've got it," out of a newer habit. The bag's mouth gaped for a second mint toothpaste caps, a hotel-sized lotion, paper, and a torn corner of silver and white foil like the kind vitamins or sleep tablets come in. She dropped the bag into a fresh one and knotted it tight. I poured coffee. The plain white mug warmed fast and felt thin at the lip. The first swallow had that hospital metal taste I hadn't shaken. The second was better. In the reflection of the microwave door, the dining table sat remade for breakfast plates, syrup, a small vase with 3 sprigs of cedar cut too short. The brass candlesticks stood side by side. One of them wore a new collar of cooled wax like a wave caught mid-break. "Checkout says 11 tomorrow," Melissa said, reading the rental binder as if it were a menu. "Deposit refunded if inventory is intact." Her finger traced the line. 2 brass candlesticks, she read aloud and laughed lightly, as if the list were a joke everyone told every year. "Coffee?" I asked her. She shook her head and said, "I'm good," to the binder. Tyler came in and opened the dishwasher, the way a man opens things he paid for. Racks rolled out with yesterday's heat ghosting away. "Who ran this last night?" he asked to the room. "Clean." "Me," Caroline said. "I did a quick." She wiped a spot that only she could see. Tyler cocked his head. "Odd empty slot. Did we miss a glass?" He slid a rack and frowned at a place where a stemmed glass should have stood, but didn't. A small spray of water had dried on the tine like a memory. "We hand-washed a few," Melissa said, already turning a page. "Don't be dramatic." "It's fine," Caroline said, which is a way to end a conversation without finishing it. I took my coffee to the dining table and sat with my back to the window. The chair gave the same small groan as last night. The cloth had a faint circle where my glass had printed itself and been wiped almost all the way away. Almost. "Dad," David said, gentle, "let me pull that runner now. Won't take a second." "Leave it," Caroline said, quick and soft. "Breakfast first." I turned my spoon in the coffee and watched the surface forget. In the hallway, the runner's corner waited like a mistake that knows it's useful. On the buffet, the pale blue forms sat in their stack, sticky note holding. The top page had crept half an inch again, and the neat header might as well have been another holiday label, Residential Care Intake Initial Assessment. I could feel it in the room the way you feel. A draft you can't name. "Anyone seen the fur hand cream?" Melissa asked. "My hands are..." She held them up, red at the knuckles. "By the sink," Katie said. "Or upstairs. I had it last night." Her eyes flicked, then landed on her toast. Both Caroline and Melissa wore long, dark cardigans again, sleeves pushed to the same place on their forearms. The smell of that winter fur cut the coffee, clean and polite. In this light, a silhouette could be either. Maybe that was the point. Before we head out to the sledding hill, Greg said to no one in particular, "We should collect the trash and stage the dishes. Makes checkout easier." He smiled at me the way people smile at neighbors they won't see again. "We've got it down to a system." "I'll take the guest bath," Jason said. He lifted the bag Katie had tied and winced at the weight. "Heavy," he said, like a joke. I finished my coffee and set the spoon on the saucer so it wouldn't drip. "I'll get more wood," I said, and stood. No one objected. Permission is just the absence of noise. In the hallway, I pressed my thumb to the runner's lifted ear and felt the give in the weave, the tiny grit in the nap. Under the edge, that pinhead of brown sat where I'd left it in the dark. A man could talk himself out of many things in daylight. He could call a crescent on a napkin gravy, a smell of fur courtesy, a card in felt-tip generosity. He could call 3 different tens memory. At the top of the dishwasher, a single wine glass sat in the sink, turned mouth down to dry. When I lifted it, a thin burr of dryness caught my lip papery, like a word you don't want to say. I set it back exactly where it had been, and dried my hands on a towel that smelled faintly of cedar and lemon oil. Thomas? Caroline's voice came from the kitchen doorway, shaped to sound helpful. Eat while it's hot. I will, I said, and listened to how the house held those words, and how they didn't promise a thing. I told the room I'd get more wood and let the cold have me first. The porch boards answered under my boots in old house syllables. The air smelled like iron and pine sap. A short stack of split oak leaned against the railing, ends waxed, the kind of detail renters notice when they're trying to prove they take care. The first log stuck to my glove with frost and let go with a sound like tape. Across the road, a dog nosed the snow, sneezed, and shook himself into steam. Somewhere downhill, a truck downshifted, and then was gone. Through the kitchen window, I could see shapes moving at an efficient breakfast speed, plates set, napkins folded, a hand pausing on the back of a chair to square it an inch, and then moving on. Houses like this carry other people's rhythms long after they leave. Back inside, the change in temperature made my stitches sting. I set the wood by the hearth. The brass screen threw back a warped picture of my face, slit by the grate. On the mantel, the two candlesticks stood closer than they had at dinner, as if they'd leaned in during the night to compare notes. One wore a new shine at the base, a bright ring where a cloth had passed with the kind of care that happens when you want something to look untouched. Coffee's there, Melissa said, not looking up from the binder. The note of someone being helpful because the script calls for it. Thanks, I said. The mug with the hairline crack waited by the fridge like a dog that's learned which hand it's supposed to sit under. Tyler and Jason clattered in, cheeks red and loud with plans. Hill behind the house is packed, Tyler said. If you hit the berm just right, he drew an arc in the air with his hand that promised 4 seconds of flight. Watch the birches at the bottom, Caroline said without turning. The kind of warning you give a neighbor's kids when you want to be seen caring. I took my coffee to the dining room and stood with my hand on the back of my chair. The cloth kept the shape of last night's ring faintly, a paler circle where water wanted to remember itself. The candlestick to my left, the shinier one, had a tiny flat on the rim of its base, no bigger than a lentil. You had to tilt your head to catch it in the light. My index finger found it and hovered. My brow found it without touching, an inch of air mapping what skin already knew. Don't fuss with their things, Greg said lightly from the doorway, a smile in his voice. Inventory makes landlords jumpy. I can read, I said, which was true and kinder than what else wanted out. He came in, set a stack of plates down too carefully, and used the moment to slide the candlestick a thumb's width toward center. A small wave of cooled wax along its stem cracked and flaked, as if it hadn't appreciated the trip. The other stick stayed as it was, duller, steadier, unremarked. Breakfast arranged itself without anyone having to decide. Syrup warmed, toast browned, small talk about the hill and the plows, and a neighbor's inflatable Santa that had fallen over in the night and now looked like a red fish on a dock. Katie laughed once, then looked at her hands. Megan wiped an invisible smear off her printed place card and left mine alone. Headache? David asked, butter pausing above his toast. Pressure, not pain, I said. The number was still a 3. He nodded like a man accepting a weather report he can't change. After we eat, I'll pull that runner, he said. Leave it, Caroline said, quick and soft again. We'll do it together. It snags if you lift wrong. I'll manage, he said, but the sentence died of natural causes. I watched the dishwasher out of the corner of my eye. The rack still wore its Rorschach of dried spray where a stem should have stood. In the sink, the single glass I'd turned mouth down had been righted and set to one side on a folded towel. The towel smelled faintly of lemon oil and cedar, the way nightstands in nicer rentals do when the cleaner is careful. The rim of the glass was clean. The papery burr I'd felt earlier didn't have a place to sit anymore. Thomas? Megan's voice from the doorframe. Can you grab napkins? She had already put them out. But the question was a gentler way to give me something to carry. I brought them. The cloth felt thick and cold, like paper money in winter. When I set them down, the place cards made a soft fan breeze against my knuckles. Mine, the only felt tip, had bled a hair at the H. We ate. The table did its table jobs, held weight, kept plates from sliding, received elbows, and then forgave them. The syrup's heat rose and was heavy with vanilla. From the living room, the television tried on a college bowl game again. A commentator said, "Momentum," and then said it 3 more ways. Tyler made a quick show of offering to help. Melissa excused him with a laugh. Jason tried to stack more than 3 plates at once and was told kindly to stop. When it ended, breakfast ended all at once, as if someone had clapped in a rehearsal. Boots were found. A lost glove announced itself by falling out of a hat. The door became a small weather event. Cold air pushed in, and children's noise from the hill pushed back. A red sled kissed the porch rail and thumped to the deck. For a moment the house held both climates, winter and syrup, and then the outside won. I stayed by the table and rearranged nothing. The candlestick's bright ring at the base caught and held a small sun from the window and let it go. On the buffet, the pale blue stack sat under its patient sticky note. The header Residential Care Intake Initial Assessment showed itself with the confidence of a label that believed it was true and just needed me to agree. I lifted one edge of the tablecloth to smooth a wrinkle no one else could see, and felt something catch. A thread, a single pale one like from a cotton sweater, had hitched itself to a rough place in the wood. I freed it and rolled it between finger and thumb until it was gone. Evidence is often the size of nothing and feels like it. When the door closed and the house exhaled, Caroline and Melissa moved in the kitchen with the friendliness of people who agree on an answer before anyone asks the question. "He needs rest," Caroline said, water running. "Of course," Melissa said. The binder made a soft thap as she closed it. "After the holidays call, keep resting." She used the exact rhythm the ballpoint had left on the page, a woman reading her own handwriting without knowing she was quoting. "Don't push him," Caroline said, the sound of a spoon set down too neatly. "We'll talk when everyone's calm." "We are calm," Melissa said, and then lowered her voice on calm like a person petting a scared dog. "I took my mug to the sink and washed it because a man washing a mug is just a man washing a mug." The water ran hot, then hotter. Steam made my nose remember the fur cream and then the antiseptic lemon from the ER. I set the cup to dry on the towel where the glass had been, making a matching wet circle where one had timed out. When I turned, the runner in the hall lay flatter than it had all morning. The little ear of fabric I had pressed had learned to lie down. Someone had taught it while I wasn't watching. "Thomas?" Greg stood by the door with his good neighbor smile. Tyler and Jason had already gone to the hill. He had stayed back to be helpful. "Need a hand with the wood box?" "I filled it," I said. He shrugged as if help weren't a job but a personality, and then he walked to the dining room and, without looking like he cared, put a finger to the shinier candlestick to nudge it another neat thumb toward center. His ring flashed once broad, yellow, smooth as a coin, and then hid. Outside, a sled screamed, and laughter rose and dissolved into the cold. Inside the house, the small things held their positions a heartbeat longer than they should have, and then pretended they'd always been there. I stood where a man stands when he is invited to sit. The light moved a fraction across the table and found the flat place on the candlestick's base again. I didn't touch it. I let the room return to its hum until the hum sounded like truth. Then I went to the hall, set my thumb on the runner's corner, and let the weave memorize me back. The house thinned itself when they all went out with sleds. Noise left with them boots on the porch, Tyler's laugh carrying longer than it should, Jason dragging a rope like it weighed more than the sled. Cold shut the door quiet. Melissa stayed behind. She'd rubbed her temples after breakfast, said the hill gave her vertigo. From upstairs came the softened edge of her voice on the phone. The words slid through the ceiling, after, resting, insurance covers, a tone low and careful, the kind of talk meant for walls, not ears. I stood in the kitchen with the cracked mug. The bracelet from the ER itched against my wrist, plastic biting where it had worn a groove. I hadn't cut it yet. Paper instructions in my pocket said I should, but part of me wanted it there. A mark reminds you when you start to doubt. The dishwasher ticked as it cooled. A faint lemon oil smell hung on the towel where last night's glass had dried. The odd slot in the rack still showed its dried spray. I touched the tine with my finger, the metal cool and clean. Maybe I dreamed it. Concussions bend memory into shapes that don't hold. On the buffet, the pale blue form sat patient, sticky note just loose enough to curl. My eyes skimmed the top line, Guardian signature, then blurred. The letters wouldn't stay put. I looked away before they rearranged into something worse. By the hearth, the woodbox held a neat stack. I lifted a split log. The fresh cut still smelled of green pine. When I set it down, a pale thread clung to my cuff. Same shade I'd rolled between thumb and forefinger at the table. Pale gray, sweater soft. Caroline's cardigan had been gray. Melissa's leaned blue in the light. Rings, sweaters, fur cream, everyone carried the same props if you needed to accuse them. The door banged. Cold and laughter tumbled in. Tyler shook snow off his collar. Jason dropped a sled on the rug and Caroline snapped, "Not on the runner." Her voice cut sharp, then softened when she saw me. "Thomas. Sit. You look pale." "I'm fine," I said, though the word came out too thin. Greg carried in a plastic bag, set it on the counter. A receipt curled from the top. His ring flashed as he tore it free. "Picked up wine, bread, batteries," he said. I caught a line before he crumpled it. "Doxy something, 12 count. My head swam a little, letters jumping. Could have been doxylamine. Could have been anything. He crushed the paper, shoved it deep in the bag. "For tomorrow," he added, too casual. Caroline moved quick to take the sack, her hand brushing his, their rings close enough to chime. "Soup tonight," she said. "Something gentle. We'll all sleep better." Through the window I saw the neighbors stringing lights along their porch, red and gold blinking steady against the gray sky. A kid next door practiced a trumpet, muffled and cheerful. Life on their side looked ordinary. Inside, cupboards shut softly. Melissa's voice settled back into silence upstairs, and Greg's ring caught the stove light one last time. I sat with my mug, let the heat numb my hand, and told myself to wait. Evidence doesn't come all at once, it seeps. Concussions make poor witnesses. And sometimes poor witnesses are all a house leaves behind. The afternoon pressed low and gray, the kind of sky that never decides if it means snow or rain. The house smelled of broth simmering, onions and bay curling into the air. Caroline stirred with a slow rhythm, wooden spoon tapping the pot as if she were keeping time only she could hear. Megan and Katie sat at the dining table with a deck of cards between them, shuffling without playing. Their laughter was light, polite, the kind you throw across a room when silence feels heavier than noise. Tyler leaned in the doorway, phone in hand, scrolling with the vacant focus of a man waiting for the day to move itself. I sat where I could watch the hall. The runner lay flatter now, corners tucked square, as if someone had trained it overnight. Sometimes I thought I saw the edge lift, only to blink and find it still. Jason came in from the porch with an armful of split wood. He dropped it by the hearth, gloves thumping against his legs as he shook off the cold. One glove slipped, and when he bent to pick it up, a folded slip of paper clung to the cuff like lint. He frowned, peeled it free, and unfolded it by reflex. Black ink, hurried hand. Just a line. After holidays he'll rest. What's due comes back. The letters leaned forward. Impatient. Jason's brow knit, but before he could speak, Megan's hand reached out quick. "That's mine," she said, voice lighter than it should have been. She folded the slip, slid it beneath the stack of cards. "Just notes. Grocery things." Her smile lasted one beat too long. Jason shrugged, but his eyes lingered on her a second before moving away. He said nothing else. The broth bubbled. Caroline hummed some carol under her breath, a half step off from the tune on the radio. Greg came in with a crumpled grocery sack, receipt wadded tight in his fist. He tossed it into the trash. The sound landed heavier than paper ought to. Through the window, the neighbors strung lights along their porch, red bulbs glowing against the gray sky. A radio somewhere outside carried a Christmas song, tinny, cheerful, off-key. The contrast seeped in, uninvited. I touched the rim of my mug, cool now, and let my eyes travel without moving my head. Rings flashing in kitchen light, cardigans in shades of gray and blue, laughter smooth thin. The soup smelled warm, ordinary. The air between us, did not. I set my mug down gently. Small things leave marks, and in a house like this, a mark is all you need to be noticed. The soup thickened the air, thyme and onion steaming until the windows filmed over. Caroline ladled bowls with a steady hand, her spoon tapping the rim, as if she were counting beats no one else could hear. Megan and Katie shuffled cards at the dining table, not playing, just moving the deck back and forth. Their laughter was light and borrowed, the kind you use when silence grows too heavy. Tyler leaned in the doorway, phone dangling, thumb moving without focus. I sat with my glasses fogged from the broth. The runner in the hall lay flat again, corners tucked as if trained overnight. Sometimes I thought I saw it lift, but every blink put it back in place. Jason came in from the porch, arms loaded with split wood. He dropped it by the hearth, gloves slapping against his thighs. When he set the salt shaker on the table, something he'd carried in from the kitchen basket, the cap loosened. A small clot of salt spilled, clinging around a curled scrap of paper that fell onto the cloth. He frowned, turned it over with one finger. Black ink, hurried hand. Just a line. After holidays he'll rest. What's due will come back. The letters leaned forward, impatient. Jason's mouth tightened, but before he could speak, Megan reached. That's nothing, she said quickly, folding it in half. Just one of our notes shopping, lists. She slipped it under the deck of cards. Katie nodded without lifting her eyes, her thumb pressing a crease into the corner of a queen until the paper bent. The room held still. Caroline's spoon hovered midair. Tyler's eyes flicked from the salt to Megan, then to me. Greg pushed his chair back with a scrape. I'll check the generator, he said, voice too casual. Plows blocked the drive again. He left without waiting for reply. I let my gaze stay on the paper until it disappeared beneath Megan's hand. The words still sat in my head, though they blurred at the edges, as if my stitches tugged the letters sideways. Concussions make poor readers too. Through the window, neighbors lit another string of bulbs, red and gold dots against the gray. Someone's radio played Silent Night, tinny but whole. A child's laugh carried across the snow, bright and ordinary. Inside, the soup cooled in bowls we hadn't touched. Tyler broke his bread in two, set it down, and looked at me. For the first time his eyes didn't slide away. Evening pressed in early, the sky already dark by 5. Shadows laid themselves along the walls, deliberate, as if they had business here. The generator thudded once in the yard, then went quiet. Greg came back brushing snow from his sleeves, his eyes a little too quick to move on. We sat again at the table. The soup had been warmed, but it tasted tired, flat. Caroline placed her spoon down and smiled with the corners only. Better warm than cold, she said, though no one had complained. Jason took 2 bites, then leaned back, smoothing his napkin flat against the cloth. His hand lingered there, pressing harder than necessary. He didn't look at me, but the gesture carried what words wouldn't. Tyler pushed his bowl away after a taste. Doesn't sit right, he murmured. He didn't name the soup. He didn't need to. Megan shifted in her seat, eyes on the neat stack of cards left from earlier, shuffling them with no game to play. Katie sat quiet, thumb worrying the corner of a queen until the paper bent. Caroline moved quickly. Fatigue, she said, voice brisk but painted kind. The drive, the altitude, Thomas especially, you need rest. She spoke like a chart being closed. I lifted my water instead of the wine near my hand. The glass kissed the plate when I set it down, leaving a ring faint as a shadow. In the hallway came the scrape of boots, set down too heavily by the door. Jason's voice followed, low. To Tyler just beyond the archway. You saw it too. Tyler answered without hesitation. Not just me. Their words carried because the house had gone so still. Megan kept shuffling. Caroline froze, spoon halfway to her mouth. Katie's thumb bent the card harder, the paper whitening at the crease. Greg reached for the wine, poured himself a glass with a noise that seemed too loud in the quiet liquid hitting the bowl of the glass like a small drum. The stitches above my eye tugged when I frowned, a thin ache humming in my head. Blood in my ears made its own pulse, louder than any word. Concussions make witnesses foggy, but not deaf. Through the window, neighbors' kitchen windows glowed gold, their silhouettes moving in warmth. Somewhere outside, a child laughed, short and sharp, before the sound was carried away by the snow. Inside, silence bent toward me, and for the first time I could feel it wasn't mine alone. Concussions make poor witnesses. Better to watch and remember than be waved off for how the words come out. It sat beside me, like a new witness waiting its turn. Morning settled heavy, the kind that feels borrowed. The sky outside was pewter flat, neighbors' roofs holding a thin crust of new snow. Inside, the air smelled of coffee reheated too long and lemon oil rubbed into the counters. Jason and Tyler sat with their mugs, shoulders angled in, voices low enough for privacy but not secrecy. I poured my own cup and let their words reach me without turning my head. Caroline said he was down by 10, Jason murmured. Tyler shook his head. Number he was telling that Sander story at 1:15. I heard it clear. Jason tapped his mug once, eyes narrow. And Greg swore he walked him up before 10. Doesn't line up. The words dropped into the air like loose nails, sharp edges glinting. Megan stood at the sink, running water over plates already clean. Katie busied her hands with the leftover deck, squaring it edge to edge, until the queen's corner gave under her thumb and bent pale. Caroline swept in with her mug, smile neat as linen. Early risers, she said brightly. Thomas, how's your head? Steady, I told her, though the stitches tugged every time I frowned, and my fingers drummed restless against the cup without asking. Greg followed, smelling of cold air and gasoline, sleeves dusted with snow. He bent at the thermostat, flicked it, his ring catching the morning light. Checked the tank generators, good for another day. His tone was casual, like weather talk, but too quick to fill the silence. Megan dried her hands on a towel, voice a shade too thin. It was before 10, wasn't it, Katie? Katie didn't look up, her thumb grinding the bent queen flat against the table. Jason leaned forward, elbows braced. His voice was calm, almost too mild. Funny how the times keep shifting. Was it before 10 or after? Caroline's spoon clinked against her mug. Does it matter? She asked, too smooth. It does, Jason said, still quiet but firmer. The room paused. Megan folded the towel small, too carefully. Greg poured wine into his cup instead of coffee, liquid hitting the glass with a noise too loud in the morning. The stitches above my eye tugged harder, a hum in my temple, blood drumming in my ears louder than their words. Concussions blur things, but not enough to miss when silence turns against itself. Through the window, a neighbor's porch lit up, a string of gold bulbs winking on in the pale daylight. Someone's radio played, "Hark the Herald," muffled, but certain. Inside, the air thickened. Caroline's eyes flicked once to Greg's, too fast not to notice. Tyler set his mug down with a weight that left a dark ring spreading on the wood. For the first time, the silence bent not just toward me, but toward them too, like the room itself was holding its breath, waiting to see who would speak next. The day sagged into gray noon, snow falling soft as sifted flour. It clung to the porch rail in thin white seams, a world trying to look clean. Inside, the air carried broth gone flat, and the resinous tang of split pine stacked by the hearth. Jason stood at the window, arms crossed. Tyler sat low in his chair, thumbs circling the rim of his mug. They didn't speak, but the space between them felt settled, like men who'd already compared notes. David ran into town for a few things. Melissa stayed upstairs. The hill gave her vertigo and took a call about insurance. I eased into the chair by the fire. The plastic band from the ER still circled my wrist, itching like a reminder. The stitches above my brow tugged when I squinted, and a faint hum filled my ears as if the house had picked up a second current. Caroline moved through the kitchen with purposeful clatter, wiping a counter already clean, folding a towel already square. "Soup's still fine," she said lightly, her voice a bandage over a crack. Megan stood near the sink, folding that towel again into a perfect square, then folding it once more. Katie handled the cards, but not to play. She pressed a nail into the corner of a jack until the paper lifted like a splinter. The door opened sharp. Greg stomped snow off his boots, runner muffling the thuds. He carried a small plastic sack, set it on the counter too firmly. A new carton of salt slid halfway out before he shoved it back. Plows left a ridge at the drive, he said, not meeting anyone's eyes. Had to stop in town. He looked at Caroline when he said it. Only her. Jason turned from the window. His voice was mild, but each word heavy. Strange thing, everyone remembers a different 10 o'clock. Tyler nodded, his tone low. Can't all be right. Megan's hands tightened on the towel, folding it until it was no more than a fist-sized knot. You're tired, she said too quickly. Not at them, not at me, but into the space itself. Katie's nail tore the jack clean across, the card splitting with a dry snap. Caroline set her mug down with precision, smile holding. Fatigue, she repeated. Softer now, as though repetition could turn doubt into truth. Greg pulled the salt carton deeper into the bag, then poured himself wine in the middle of the day, the liquid hitting glass with a sound too loud for noon. My stitches tugged again, the hum in my ears growing sharper. Concussions blur things, but not enough to miss when silence tips against itself. Through the window, the neighbors' kids tumbled around a crooked snowman, their laughter clear against the gray. A door slammed. Someone shouted cheerfully, "Hot cocoa!" Life on their side moved forward, golden and ordinary. Inside, Caroline's eyes flicked once to Greg's fast, sharp, too quick not to notice. Jason watched it happen. Tyler's mug left a wet ring darkening the wood. And the silence didn't just bend toward me anymore. It sat heavy across all of us, like a witness waiting to be called. Afternoon thinned into dull silver, the kind of light that makes clocks feel stuck. The house smelled of stale coffee and detergent on plates, already rinsed twice. Jason sat at the table, rolling his mug between his palms before setting it down. Tyler leaned against the doorway, arms crossed, eyes steady on the room like it might confess if he watched long enough. Greg came in from outside, boots thumping the runner. A plastic sack hung from his hand. He pulled out a new carton of salt, slid it onto the shelf above the stove, then stuffed the empty bag deep in the trash. Jason's voice was mild, but it carried. Didn't realize we were out. His eyes stayed on the carton. Greg didn't pause. Better to have extra. House rules shortages get billed. Jason's head tilted. Funny. Shaker was half full this morning. The room held still. Megan sat at the end of the counter, folding a dish towel smaller and smaller, until it was no more than a knot in her hand. Katie stared at the table, thumb peeling the label off a water bottle in thin curling strips. Caroline stepped in quickly, smoothing the silence. Holiday cooking takes more than you think. Stuffing, potatoes, soup. It adds up. Her smile stayed soft, but her hands kept moving, wiping a counter already dry. Tyler's voice cut in, low and even. Seems like a lot of extras lately. He didn't look at Greg. He looked at Jason. Then at me. The hum in my ears sharpened. My stitches pulled when I frowned. The ER bracelet itched. A cheap plastic reminder still clamped on my wrist. My hand shook when I lifted my mug, water sloshing close to the rim. Caroline's spoon tapped her mug in time with the silence. Greg poured himself more wine, though his first glass wasn't empty, the sound loud as a faucet in the hush. Through the window, neighbors lit another string of colored bulbs across their porch, steady and bright against the gray. A door shut. Laughter carried. Wood smoke drifted sharp in the air, the kind that seeps into coats and stays. Inside, Jason leaned forward, elbows on the table. Half a shaker at breakfast, new carton by noon. Doesn't add up. Greg's jaw tightened. Caroline's smile stayed, but too long. Megan's knuckles whitened around the towel. Katie flicked the last shred of label to the floor. Jason and Tyler sat closer now, shoulder to shoulder. For the first time, they weren't on opposite sides of the table. Tyler's phone buzzed. He grabbed the nearest one from the sideboard, same black case thinking it was his. Megan's screen lit up. A preview banner. After holidays, nothing serious, we'll get what's due, he'll rest, asterisk. He turned it so Jason could read. Neither of them said a word. And the silence didn't bend this time. It broke, sharp as glass. Evening pressed down early, lamps clicking on before you realized the light was gone. The rental bulbs spread a dim gold across the room, shadows filling corners like tenants who'd settled in. Caroline moved between kitchen and table, her smile steady, her voice smooth, hands never idle. Greg sat near the hearth with his wine, the glass trembling faintly as he turned it but never drank. On the shelf above the stove, the fresh carton of salt stood like a flag no one wanted to claim. Jason and Tyler sat close at the table now, shoulder to shoulder, their silence a kind of pact. Megan drifted along the sideboard, straightening the frames of family photographs they'd propped there, aligning edges already square. Katie sat with her hands low, crumbling a piece of bread into neat crumbs she pushed into a line across the cloth. I kept to my water, another faint ring blooming on the wood. The stitches above my brow pulled with each breath, and a low hum filled my ears. I was afraid if I blinked too long I'd miss the words that mattered. Jason spoke first, tone calm, but his eyes stayed on Greg. You brought in salt. Not a question. Greg's mouth tightened. And what of it? Jason leaned back, unhurried. Half a shaker this morning. New carton by noon. Caroline stepped in quickly. Holiday meals take more than you think. Stuffing. Soup. Potatoes. It adds up. She reached to smooth Greg's sleeve as she spoke. He pulled his arm away just enough to leave the gesture hanging. You were the one worried about supplies, he said, voice low, wineglass tapping once against the table. Her smile held, but too long. I meant in private, Greg. Not at the table. The edge in her tone slipped past the mask. The words dropped heavy. Megan froze by the photographs, her hand lingering on a frame too long. Katie pressed the line of crumbs until they scattered, a small mess against the cloth. Tyler leaned forward, elbows braced. 3 versions of one night. Extra salt, extra wine. Things don't add up. Greg's jaw set hard. Maybe you're looking for problems that aren't there. Jason's reply was quiet but carried. Or maybe we've stopped ignoring the ones that are. The silence thickened, the wine in Greg's glass trembling with the weight of his hand. Caroline's eyes flicked once to his fast, sharp, impossible to miss. Through the window, the neighbor's door swung wide. A gust of laughter spilled out with the smell of roast meat. A bell chiming as the door closed again. Their windows glowed steady, warm. Inside, the questions no longer circled me. They lay heavy at Greg and Caroline's feet. Night pressed harder than it should have, the house lit with weak bulbs and the steady hiss of the furnace. Snow tapped against the windows, thin as dust, shaken from a rug. Caroline stood at the stove, stirring a pot that didn't need stirring. Greg sat heavy in his chair, his wine half gone. Jaw working, though he said nothing. Megan lingered near the photos she'd straightened, her hand still hovering as if she might move them again. Katie brushed crumbs off the table, pushing them into her palm and letting them fall to the floor. Jason and Tyler sat side by side, their posture quiet but certain. I kept my hands folded, the plastic band still itching at my wrist. The hum in my ears was steady now. A kind of pressure that made every sound land sharper. Jason's voice broke the quiet. 3 stories for one night. Extra salt. Extra wine. Too many explanations. Greg shifted, shoulders rising. You're chasing shadows. Tyler leaned in, tone even. Or we're watching you make them. Caroline turned from the stove, spoon still in her hand. Enough. Her voice cracked sharper than she meant, the word echoing longer than it should have. Megan flinched. Katie's hands froze mid-motion. Caroline steadied herself, but the mask slipped. You think you know everything? You think you see the whole picture? You weren't here when it mattered. None of you were. The silence landed hard. Greg's eyes snapped to her, sharp with warning. Caroline. She set the spoon down, metal clattering against the counter. He doesn't remember, she said, pointing at me. He's confused, injured, and all you do is dig, when what he needs is rest. Her voice wavered on rest, the word sounding practiced, like she'd said it too many times already. Jason's gaze stayed on her, steady. Funny. That's the same word on the notes we found. Her face stiffened, but she didn't answer. Outside, A neighbor's car door slammed, headlights cutting across the snow. A burst of laughter carried, muffled but whole. Inside, no one laughed. Jason and Tyler didn't look away. For the first time, Caroline did. The house had gone too still. Even the furnace seemed to hesitate, its hum dipping low before catching again. Snow pressed heavy against the windows, muffling the world until every breath sounded louder than it should. Greg sat rigid, fingers tight around his glass, though the wine barely moved. Caroline kept her back to us, shoulders straight, spoon abandoned on the counter where it clattered once, and lay still. Megan stood near the photographs, hands folded tight as if she were holding something fragile. Katie stared at the floor, crumbs clinging to her palm. Jason pushed his chair back slow, the scrape of wood sharp in the quiet. He pulled something from his pocket, smoothed it flat on the table. The scrap of paper. Black ink, hurried hand. After holidays he'll rest, what's due will come back. Caroline's breath caught. Megan closed her eyes. Tyler leaned forward, voice low but firm. We found it in the salt. You can't say it wasn't meant to be hidden. Greg's jaw clenched. Notes don't prove anything. Jason's gaze stayed fixed. They prove enough. Words don't write themselves. Caroline turned, finally, her face pale in the dim light. You don't understand. She stopped, swallowed. Tried again. It was only talk. Nothing more. Her words hung brittle in the air. Megan whispered, almost to herself, I told you it wasn't right. Katie shifted, crumbs falling from her hand like ash. I sat with my water untouched, the ring it left widening on the wood. My stitches pulled as I watched, but the hum in my ears quieted for the first time. Jason and Tyler were no longer across from me, they were with me, their words carrying what mine hadn't. Through the window, the neighbor's porch glowed steady, their snowman leaning crooked but crowned with a scarf. Laughter rose again from across the street, whole and unbroken. Inside, the questions had found their place. They no longer circled me. They circled her.